This is my first video update coming to you from Athens, Greece on this Thursday, Thursday morning. And let's talk about some news. So we had three big news stories yesterday. Three big things went down, and they were all related to Russia's another week of massive Russian military missile strikes against Ukraine, knocking out much of Ukraine's electric grid. In some cities, for example, Kiev, I read reports that 80% of Kiev was without power. I saw a lot of photo and video reports showing people in Ukraine in multiple cities lining up for gas, stocking up on food supplies, water shortages, communication being knocked out, internet being knocked out. Just another week of Russian missiles hitting at Ukraine, hitting any target they want in any city they want. Ukraine air defense systems completely, absolutely helpless, unable to stop Russia's missile or drone strikes against Ukraine, further degrading Ukraine's electric grid. Things got so bad yesterday that the power outages in Ukraine actually led to a collapse of the electric grid in Moldova as well. And so this prompted three events to take place. The first thing that happened yesterday is that you had an extraordinary UN Security Council meeting take place so that they could discuss what was going on with Russia's missile strikes in Ukraine, weekly missile strikes in Ukraine. You had the European Parliament. They designated Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. And you also had the European Union coming to some sort of oil price cap agreement. So you had these three big events happen at the same time when Russia was dismantling the electric grid in Ukraine. And we've explained on the Duran and on this channel what Russia is doing. They knock out the electric grid. They monitor Ukraine's reaction. Ukraine goes to fix the substations or whatever it needs to fix. And then Russia, the next week, they launch missiles and drones, once again, knocking out that electric grid. And they're bringing the infrastructure of Ukraine to a point of collapse. Slowly, every single week, the Russian military, they push the Ukraine electric infrastructure closer to complete collapse. And of course, that complete collapse will most likely lead to a massive refugee crisis hitting Europe as well, hitting the European Union. Things got so bad yesterday that even Macron was in panic mode. Reuters, the AFP, all of these news outlets, they actually reported that Macron was in such panic, realizing that Ukraine's infrastructure is collapsing, and this could lead to an 8 million person refugee outflow from Ukraine, inflow into the European Union, that he was calling on EU officials to sit down next week and to negotiate some sort of ceasefire, some sort of truce with Russia. So Macron kind of went into a panic, rightly so, because Macron may be one of the only EU leaders that realizes that instead of passing stupid resolutions which designate Russia a state sponsor of terror, perhaps the EU should understand that in the next month or two, they may have a catastrophic refugee crisis on their hands, on top of a catastrophic electric infrastructure crisis on their hands, not only affecting Ukraine, but affecting Moldova and also affecting the European Union. Keep in mind that there are many EU countries, for example, Poland, that to this very day actually buy electricity from Ukraine. Ukraine, to this very day, sells electricity to EU member states, specifically Poland. So while the people of Ukraine are sitting in darkness, the Zelensky government continues to profit from the sale of electricity to Poland. Just a little bit of info there for everybody. So let's start with the let's start with the European Parliament and their designation of Russia as a state sponsor of terror. This was approved yesterday. European lawmakers voted in favor of a resolution calling Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, this move is largely symbolic, but it does open up a pathway for the EU to do two things going forward. The first thing the kleptocrats in Brussels can do is that the European Commission, under the guidance and the recommendation of the EU Parliament, they can decide to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. So now Ursula, the pirate of Brussels, van der Crazy, can say, because the EU Parliament has voted on this and they've recommended Russia be designated a state sponsor of terrorism, the European Commission says that Russia is a state sponsor of terrorism. And then that would lead to the second thing that the European Union and van der Crazy can do, is that they can, and I'm not sure how much power they have to do this, but they can try to compel, to force EU member states to designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. I think that's kind of stretching things, but look, the European Commission, they got EU member states to cut off Russian media to all member states. They got EU member states to close their airspace. They got EU member states to agree to an oil price cap, and I'll get into that later. So, it sounds crazy that the EC, that van der Crazy, is now going to go to each member state in the European Union and tell them, you have to designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. But, the EC has done this before. So that's what this vote actually does. It doesn't do anything now. It is symbolic, but it could lead to the EC, to the European Commission, and all member states moving forward to designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. I believe right now there are 3 or 4 countries that have designated Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. That is 4 countries. That is Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Poland. Big surprise. Big surprise on those 4 countries. But that's what this resolution does. So yes, it's symbolic. Yes, it doesn't bind any country to anything just yet, but that's the point of this resolution. It's all about providing cover to the European Commission so that they can move forward to taking this action on an EU Commission and then member state level. The US has avoided designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism because even the warmongers in the neocon warmongers in the Department of State, Blinken, Newland, and all of these people, they even understand. I hope they understand. Maybe they don't. Maybe the Pentagon is telling them this, but there are officials in the United States that understand the minute you designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, that's it. All diplomatic coordination, negotiations, communication, all of it is gone. That's it. It's over. The U.S. has designated Cuba, North Korea, Iran, and Syria as state sponsors of terrorism. They can get away with designating these smaller countries as state sponsors of terrorism, but if they do that to Russia, such a large, powerful country, then it has all kinds of implications on the world stage, and implications that could damage the United States. For example, just one thing that comes to mind is the U.S. will not be able to work with Russia on a level of going after terrorists, on a global level of fighting terrorism. That would be it. Or weapons sales or weapons movements. The U.S. is not going to be able to coordinate with Russia with those things and I'm talking on a global level, which the U.S. does on a global level. The U.S. does communicate with Russia with regards to fighting terrorism, with regards to fighting the movement of weapons, all kinds of things. The implications would be catastrophic for the United States. Absolutely catastrophic if they were to brand Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. But for the European Union, well, the dummies in the EU, they don't think about these things, do they? Zelensky, he tweeted this with regards to this EU Parliament decision. Russia must be isolated at all levels and held accountable in order to end its long-standing policy of terrorism in Ukraine and across the globe. And across the globe, Zelensky said in his tweets, across the globe, okay. Yeah, we're not going to get into the terrorism across the globe line of that tweet. Anyway, so that's what Zelensky said. And once again, Zelensky also urged the United States and other countries to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. So that is the first big piece of news that took place yesterday. The second thing that happened yesterday is and by the way, before I forget, let me read you what Zakharova said with regards to this decision from the European Union. Zakharova said, "I propose designating the European Parliament as a sponsor of idiocy." That is what Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova wrote on Telegram. Yeah. It's an absolutely idiotic move from the European Union, from the European Parliament. Absolutely idiotic. But there you have it. That is the EU Parliament. They take things a step further than the United States. Maybe the US was pushing them to do that, sure, but I actually, in this case, I don't even think the United States even needed to push the EU Parliament to make these decisions. I just think it's just more idiocy, as Zakharova puts it, from EU Parliament members. But let's just hope that it stops there. Let's just hope it stops at this symbolic vote, and it doesn't go further. Though I doubt it. I am pretty sure that the EC is going to use this Parliament decision to force member states to start designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. I think that would be a bridge too far, but I don't know. That's my guess on this. So let's talk about the United Nations and the UN Security Council. They had an extraordinary session because of Russia's missile strikes against Ukraine. And during this extraordinary session, the U.S. managed, which is very unorthodox, they managed to convince the UN to allow Zelensky to speak via video message to the members of the UN Security Council. This is very, very unorthodox. It's not something that should happen at a Security Council meeting. You shouldn't have, and I'm trying to think if this has happened before, but you shouldn't have a country that's not in the Security Council, a leader of a country that's not in the Security Council, be able to address Security Council members via video. This is something that was very weird, but obviously the U.S., knowing the control that it has over the UN, they managed to make this thing happen. And so Zelensky, he addressed the UN Security Council members, and he talked about Russian terrorism and how Russia was attacking Ukraine at the very moment that he was speaking to the Security Council members. And then Zelensky made his pitch. He wants more weapons, more air defense systems, and more money. The Russian ambassador to the United Nations, he actually explained why Russia on a weekly basis hits the Ukraine electric grid. And according to the Russian UN representative Vasily Nebenzia, addressing the extraordinary session of the UN Security Council, which was called over the collapse of the power grid in Ukraine and Moldova, Nebenzia said, "The Russian missile strikes are aimed at disrupting the delivery of weapons and supplies from the West to Ukrainian troops on the front through which NATO is conducting a proxy war against Russia. Nebenzia also went on to say that Moscow is not targeting civilian residences, and Nebenzia claimed that the regrettable damage to residential areas is often caused by Ukrainian air defenses deployed in populated areas. Quote, as a result, missile debris or Ukrainian rockets that have gone astray hit objects that Russia did not even aim at, Nebenzia said, pointing to the photos shared on Wednesday by Ukrainians themselves, allegedly showing fragments of U.S.-supplied rockets found in their damaged homes in Kiev and nearby Vyshgorod. Your reckless flow of weapons to Ukraine has caused these deaths, Nebenzia told the Western envoys at the Security Council. So that is the Russian ambassador to the United Nations telling the Security Council that the reasons Russia is hitting the electric grid in Ukraine is not so much because Russia is at war with Ukraine. It's not so much to do damage to Ukrainian infrastructure as it is to do damage to the flow of NATO weapons, because Russia is in essence at war with NATO. And Nebenzia even says it. He says NATO is conducting a proxy war against Russia. So if NATO were to stop the weapons flow to Ukraine, then Russia would stop its missile strikes on Ukraine infrastructure, electric grid, substations, railways, etc. So this is pretty much Russia saying, look, we're at war with NATO here. Don't make this into Russia is attacking Ukraine because they want to attack Ukraine. Russia's attacking Ukraine because they have to prevent a NATO attack against Russia. That's pretty much what Nebenzia is saying in essence. That's what he's getting at. So that was the Security Council meeting that took place yesterday. And we also had the last bit of news before I wrap this video up, and that has to do with this oil price cap. They finally did it. Once again, the European Union outdoing the stupidity and warmongering of the entire collective West of the United States. The European Union has actually agreed to an oil price ceiling of $65 to $70 per barrel. But according to Politico, Poland is still insisting on a price ceiling of $30 per barrel. So it looks like you're going to get this oil price cap, $65, $70 per barrel, absolutely, completely meaningless. Poland, of course, is holding out for $30 a barrel. Why stop at $30 a barrel? Poland, why not make it zero? $1. Make Russian oil like a dollar store, or 99 cents. That sounds even better. 99 cents. I think that should be the price ceiling. All the Russian oil you want, European Union, for 99 cents. Why $30, Poland? Why? So I think we all understand that this is meaningless. The effects of this is just going to be more suffering for the citizens of the EU, and more closures of EU businesses and more industry of the European Union moving to the United States or relocating to Asia, because it's just simply going to be too expensive to operate in the European Union, given the price of gas, electricity, oil. Things are just going to be too hard to keep your shop open in the European Union, because what's going to happen is that the EU is going to use Russian oil. You better believe it that the European Union is going to be using Russian oil. It's just that it's going to be buying the Russian oil from India, from China, from Greek tankers that are kind of traveling around the world, and they're rehypothecating, I guess you could say. They're fixing up this Russian oil to not be considered Russian oil. Japan, I've actually heard Japan is also going to be reselling Russian oil to Europe. Everyone is just going to be buying Russian oil at $70 a barrel, because Russia does sell the oil at a discount to various countries. Let's say India, for example. They do sell Russian oil to India at $70 a barrel. Then India has these massive refineries. I mean, some of the biggest refineries in the world. And then they sell this oil back to the EU for I don't know, 90 a barrel, 100 a barrel. And they tell the EU, well, this is Indian oil. And the EU says, yes, Indian oil. Okay, that's good. Stamped Indian oil. Boom. There you go. Now buy it, EU suckers. And the European Union says, yes, we'll buy it at 100. 110, 120 India. We'll buy it as long as it's not Russian oil, even though it is Russian oil. So that's basically what's going to happen. That is exactly what's going to happen. And Russia has said they're not going to sell their oil directly to countries that are putting a price cap, oil and petroleum products. Not only oil, we're talking about petroleum products too. They're not going to sell it to countries directly that put a price cap. So this oil is all going to go to the East, to Asia, to all these countries in Asia. And they're going to make a killing out of this. And they're going to be laughing along with Putin at how stupid, how galactically dumb the European Union is. But the heads of the EU, they know what they're doing as well, because they're bought off by the United States and by the globalist elites. And all they're doing is they are just, they're driving in the final nail into the coffin of EU industry, EU business, and the prosperity and the happiness of their very own citizens. That's all they're doing. They're just driving that final nail into the coffin at the behest of their globalist masters. That is all they're doing. They have signed away the EU's future with this move and all the other moves that they've made. They've signed away Europe's prosperity. Deindustrialization, complete. So all that's going to happen is Europe is going to buy Russian oil at a much higher price than what the rest of the world is going to be getting that Russian oil. And the Greek tankers, the Greek oil tankers, the shippers, the shipping class here in Greece, you better believe that they're going to sell Russian oil. They're just going to change the flags, change the documents on the ship, and they're going to make the ship travel all the way around the world, maybe 3-4 times around the world, driving the price higher and higher for that oil. And then eventually they're going to come back to Europe and they're going to say, here you go. Here's your oil at 120, European Union. Congratulations. You've accomplished nothing. Virtue signaling, grandstanding. Ursula the pirate, Vander Crazy, is going to give a speech any moment now, and she's going to get up to the podium and she's going to say, today, the European Union has shown its solidarity once again against the evil war machine of Vladimir Putin. Together, we have decided to put a ceiling on Russian oil at $65 a barrel, which will effectively drive the Russian economy into tatters. Into tatters, I tell you. Tatters is what the Russian economy will be because of the EU's solidarity and resolve in the face of Russian barbarity and terrorism and cruelty to Zelensky and all of Europe. That is what she's going to say. I hope there's nobody watching me. Probably saying, what's this crazy guy doing in the park here in Greece? Anyway, that's exactly what Ursula's going to say. That's what she's going to say. And by the way, the European Union is now also coming out and saying that they've managed to completely divest from Russian gas. They say they're completely out of the Russian gas market. They've got enough gas via storage and LNG and all of this stuff to say that they're not dependent on Russian gas anymore. Of course, the European Union, lying to their people as they so often do, they forget to mention that, yeah, this year your storage is full of gas because that was storage of Russian gas that you were filling up your facilities with before you decided to go ahead and sanction Russian energy, before you decided to cut off Russian energy. So you were actually filling up on Russian gas beforehand in the early days of the SMO. And the EU forgot to mention that all this LNG that you're getting is going to come at a price of 4 to 10 times more than what the price of gas was from Russia. All of the LNG has to be bought. From what I understand, LNG is pretty much bought on the spot markets as well. So, I mean, this is going to come at a massive cost once again to the European Union. And to make matters even worse, the EU getting involved in the LNG game getting so involved in the LNG game is going to actually hurt the energy prices for other countries, for other markets, because now they have to compete with the European Union as well on the spot markets for LNG pricing. So they're going to make life miserable for other countries as well. So if you're living in a country outside of the European Union and you're having to pay more for your gas, blame Ursula. That's who's to blame, because she's the one that decided to cut off the cheap, dependable Russian gas via the pipelines of Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, and other pipelines. And she's the one that decided to get into the LNG game, which means that EU citizens are going to pay more for the LNG, for the gas. People outside of the European Union are going to pay more for the gas because now they have another big buyer in the gas spot markets, and everyone now is going to pay more. Thank you very much, Ursula the Pirate. Once again, the European Union, not happy with doing damage to their own citizens, is going to do damage to everyone else around the world. So with that being said, let's just do a quick clown world and we'll wrap this video up. This has to do with protests that have been taking place in Europe, and I imagine are going to really ramp up as the winter progresses. The Financial Times, they ran an article saying anti-war protests stretch across Central Europe. And that's not the clown world of this article from the Financial Times. The clown world is that the Financial Times, which is reporting on the growing movement for peace in Ukraine and Central Eastern Europe, so they're reporting about the growing movement for peace protests, in other words. They're reporting on the peace protests, which makes sense. The people in Central and Eastern Europe, they want peace. Well, the Financial Times says that this is, and I quote, these peace protests, keep that in mind, this is a disturbing trend for the European political mainstream. People protesting for peace, according to the Financial Times, is, and I quote, a disturbing trend. God forbid you have people in Central and Eastern Europe wanting peace. God forbid you have that. That would ruin the grift, wouldn't it? That would ruin all the money and all the weapons and all the industry moving over to the United States and to different countries, and the deindustrialization of Europe and the Great Reset and you'll own nothing and be happy. It'll ruin all of that stuff. That would be a disturbing thing indeed. God forbid you have people get out on the streets and protest for peace. That is the Financial Times, everybody. That is the clown world. I will end it there, the Duran.locals.com, and go to the Duran shop as well. 10% off. Here you go. Use the code. Good day. This is my Duran sweatshirt, and this is the flag of Slovakia today. I'm wearing the flag of Slovakia today, and we are also on Rockfin as well. And that is the video. Take care.